The letter he never opened. The letter had yellowed at Dot. It sat, unopened, wedged between tax bills and retirement brochures on the cluttered desk of a man who thought he'd outrun the past. Gerald Crane, 58, lived in a tidy apartment over a paint store in Milwaukee. His life was a grid. Breakfast at 6, paint inventory at 7, lunch by noon, home by 6. It was routine. It was forgettable. And it was, but on this particular Thursday, something small, a paper cut on his thumb from that unopened envelope, changed everything. Gerald flinched and brought the injured finger to his mouth, tasting the bitterness of ink and blood. He looked at the envelope again. The handwriting was crooked, like someone had written it on a moving train. Faded pencil. A smudge where a tear might have fallen. The return address said St. Mary's Children's Center, room 414. He didn't need to open it to know who it was from 20-8 years ago. He was 29, fresh out of a reckless marriage with a woman named Valerie. It had been a whirlwind. 2 months of laughter, 1 pregnancy, and a breakdown that spanned the next year. Gerald had left before his son was born. He'd told himself it was because he wasn't ready. Told others it was because Valerie was unstable. But the truth, if he had the courage to admit it, was that he was scared. Scared the boy wouldn't be his. Scared he'd become his father. And when Valerie died suddenly in a car accident 4 years later, Gerald made one call to the orphanage, and when they asked if he'd like to meet his son, he simply said, no. Present day. The letter had arrived 2 weeks ago. He buried it in paper, in distraction. But now, that paper cut, that ridiculous, tiny sting, had forced him to notice it again. He slid his calloused thumb beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, neatly folded. On the top corner was a doodle of a stick figure holding a heart. Dear Gerald Crane, my name is Micah. I'm your son. That line knocked the air out of him. I know you didn't want to be part of my life. I get it. Mom was complicated. I've read her journals. I know what she said about you. I don't hate you. Actually, I've thought about you more than you believe. I guess. I just wanted to know who I came from. Gerald blinked fast. I'm writing because I'm sick. Really sick. I'm 27 now. My heart's failing, and the doctors say I'm not going to make it past the year without a transplant. I don't expect you to care, but in case I don't make it, I just wanted to say I'm not angry. I hope your life is good. If you ever wanted to meet, I'm at St. Mary's Children's Center. I'm still here, Dad. Micah, there was no bitterness in the letter, no accusations, just silence and sadness stretched across a few lines. Gerald sat still for hours. The paper trembled in his hands, even when his body was still. That night, he didn't eat, didn't sleep. The image of that stick figure holding a heart haunted him. In the dark, he kept whispering, I'm still here, Dad. The next morning, he made a call. Not to St. Mary's. Not yet. Instead, he called the only person who had ever kept in touch with Valerie after the divorce. Her sister, Claudia. Claudia was a nurse in Cincinnati. She hadn't spoken to Gerald in 20 years. When she heard his voice, she said, You have some nerve. I got a letter, he said, from Micah. Silence. Claudia's voice softened. You waited long enough. Is it true about his heart? Yes, she said. And he still wants to meet you. Don't ask me why. Gerald swallowed. Is it too late? He has months, maybe weeks. Depends on the day. The train ride to St. Mary's was 6 hours. Gerald stared out the window, replaying a lifetime of silence, wondering how to condense 3 decades of absence into something that wouldn't hurt to say aloud. At St. Mary's, the halls were clean, with faded murals of cartoon animals. Along the walls, cheerful disguises for devastating realities. Room 414 was at the far end. He paused before the door. He could leave. He could walk out now. Go home. Pretend the letter got lost in the mail. But then he remembered the line. I'm still here, Dad. Inside the room, Micah was thinner than Gerald expected, pale, hooked to tubes and machines that clicked and sighed around him. But his eyes were clear. Alive. Gerald stood frozen at the door. Micah noticed. Are you? Gerald nodded. Yeah, I'm your, I know, Micah said softly. For a moment, neither spoke, just looked at each other. Gerald saw bits of Valerie in the boy's jaw, his eyebrows, his stubborn stare. But he also saw himself, in the shoulders, in the quiet. Wait, Micah waited. I thought you'd be taller, Micah joked. Gerald let out a shaky laugh. I thought you'd hate me. I did, Micah admitted. Then I got tired of that. Over the next hour, they talked. Mostly Micah talked. About the foster homes. The good ones. The bad ones. The time he ran away to Chicago and slept under a bridge. The social worker who convinced him to go back. The job he lost because of chest pains. The music he loved. The way he played guitar, even with a central line in his chest. Gerald couldn't speak. Every word was a confession he couldn't make. Every silence was a punishment he couldn't undo. Before he left that day, Micah handed him something. A second. Letter. In case you didn't come, it read. But you did. That night, Gerald stood outside St. Mary's and wept like a man who had broken something too sacred to repair. And for the first time in his adult life, he prayed. Not to be forgiven, but for more time. Just more time. The promise he shouldn't have made. It's strange. The things a person decides to do when they know their time is limited. Micah started teaching Gerald how to play guitar. It was a small thing, symbolic, almost childish, but Micah insisted. No one gets to leave this earth without knowing how to play Blackbird, he said, grinning under the weight of a nasal cannula and heart monitor leads. Gerald's fingers were too stiff. His rhythm was awful. But he kept coming. Back every day at 9 a.m. sharp. 1 hour of guitar. 1 hour of talking. Then silence. No rush. No pressure. Just time. The very thing they'd lost. I was angry for so long, Micah admitted one morning as he adjusted his four-pole. I don't blame you, Gerald said, strumming clumsily. I thought, maybe if I got sick enough, maybe someone would call you. Maybe you'd come. I'm sorry, Gerald said, the words brittle with shame. I should have come years ago. Micah looked out the window at the tree casting long shadows over the sidewalk. But you're here now. One afternoon, a nurse named Alejandra pulled Gerald aside in the hallway. You've been coming regularly, she said gently. Yes, Micah looks forward to your visits. He doesn't say it, but it's changed him. Gerald nodded. There's something else, she said. The transplant list isn't moving fast enough. Micah's rare blood type, AB negative, makes it harder. It could be months, or might never happen. Gerald's jaw clenched. Isn't there anything else? Alejandra hesitated. There's always live donation, in very rare cases, but the heart's not one of those. He knew. Hearts couldn't be donated while alive. So the phrase live donor had only one cruel implication for everyone, except the recipient. That night, Gerald searched the internet for everything he could find on organ donation. The more he read, the more hollow he felt. He had missed Micah's childhood, his teenage years, his birthdays, his victories and heartbreaks. And now, when he had finally shown up, he was watching his son vanish in front of him. Was there such a thing as love after too much absence? Could love be proven through death? The next morning, Micah handed Gerald a notebook. I started writing music again, he said. It helps. Gerald flipped through the pages. Lyrics, chord progressions, a song titled Secondhand Heart. Micah grinned shyly. It's about you, kind of about me too. About wanting something you think you don't deserve, and maybe getting it anyway. Gerald swallowed. Can I hear it? Only when it's finished. A week later, Micah collapsed during physical therapy. Cardiac arrest. He was revived. Barely, but the doctors delivered the verdict with grim faces. He won't survive another one. Gerald sat alone in the chapel of St. Mary's that night. No candles. No light but the moon bleeding through stained glass. He whispered, "Give me his pain. Give me his broken heart. Take mine." The next day, Gerald signed a document. It wasn't legal. It wasn't formal. But it was a letter, one Micah would only receive if Gerald died suddenly. A letter that would clear the way for a direct donation if circumstances aligned. It was a selfish act in the disguise of love. Or maybe it was love wearing the mask of sacrifice. He didn't know anymore. "Micah," he said quietly at the bedside later that day, "if I could give you my heart, I would." Micah smiled, weakly. "You already did." Meanwhile, a new twist unfolded. Alejandra returned with news. "There's a donor," she said. "Car accident, young, healthy, AB negative." Hope surged like lightning through Gerald's chest. But there's a complication. The hospital where he's being held is out of state. Family's unsure. Time sensitive. If we don't get confirmation in the next 24 hours, it's off. Gerald felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Desperation. He called the family himself. Somehow, the hospital connected him. "I'm Micah Crane's father," he said to a woman on the other. "And your son could save mine." There was crying, hesitation, but the family agreed to speak with the hospital liaison. And the miracle? It slipped away at midnight. The donor's heart went to a child higher on the list. Gerald stood in the hallway, his phone hanging from limp fingers, the walls around him cold with silence. That night, Micah noticed the change. "You look like you lost a fight." "I did," Gerald said. "I lost time." "You didn't lose anything," Micah replied. "You're here." Then, a twist even Micah didn't see coming. Dr. Laren, the cardiac specialist, asked to meet Gerald in private. "There's something unusual about your latest tests," she said. "My tests?" "We ran routine panels last week. You're a perfect genetic match." Gerald blinked. "Because I'm his father?" "No," she said. "It's more than that. Gerald, you were born with a duplicated coronary artery. It's rare, but it might allow you to survive with partial function if carefully managed." Gerald stared. "You're saying, if you were to die of brain death, but your heart remained viable, we might be able to preserve and transfer?" It's experimental. Dangerous. But yes, your heart could save Micah." Gerald left the hospital in a daze. His footsteps were heavy on the parking lot pavement. The sky above was gray, as if holding its breath. At home that night, he wrote another letter. This one wasn't for Micah. It was for himself. "I failed as a father for nearly 3 decades. But I have a chance, one, to get something right. If I go tomorrow, I want my last act to be one of love. Give him my heart. Literally, not because I owe him, but because he deserves to live. And I deserve to finally be a father, even if it cost me everything." He folded it, signed it, placed it beside his bed. Then he whispered the same prayer he had whispered every night for the past 2 weeks. "More time. Or take mine." A father's deal with God. You ever make a deal with God? Gerald asked Micah quietly one morning. Micah, pale and tethered to machines, blinked slowly. "Only when I'm desperate." "I made one last night," Gerald whispered, not sure he was listening. Micah didn't respond. His eyes flicked toward the window, where morning light broke in hazy strips. There was a shift in the air, like both of them were waiting for something neither could name. 2 weeks had passed since the failed transplant match. Micah was weakening. His hands trembled when he picked up a fork. The color had drained from his face to the point where even the nurses stopped pretending things were stable. Every beep of the monitor now sounded louder than the last dot. Gerald had been staying in a cot outside room 414. He hadn't been home in 10 days. He couldn't. The thought of being even one street away from his son made his stomach twist in a way that felt like punishment. That morning, Dr. Laren sat down with him in the hospital cafeteria. She looked tired. "We need to prepare for end of life care," she said gently. "I'm so sorry." Gerald's hand clenched around his coffee cup. "I'm not ready," he said. "No parent is." "I wasn't there for the beginning of his life," he said. "I won't let that be the last chapter." Then came the whisper in the hallway. Another donor. This time, local. Motorcycle crash. Brain dead. Young. Blood match. But again. Micah was second on the list. Gerald slammed his fist into a vending machine. "I have to do something." Alejandra pulled him aside. "You can't force the system, Gerald." "I'm not trying to force the system," he said. "I'm trying to outrun death." That night, Gerald drove. Not anywhere in particular, just away. He ended up outside a church. He hadn't stepped inside one in 20 years. The pews were empty. The sanctuary was quiet. A flickering red candle in the corner marked the tabernacle. He sat and he spoke. "I don't even know if I believe in you, but I need you to hear me. My son is dying. My son, the boy I turned my back on. I can't fix the past. I can't give him his childhood. But I can give him this. I can give him what I have left. So take it. Take my time. Take my future. Take my heart. But let him live." He didn't cry. Not this time. There were no tears left. Only silence. Only surrender. The next morning, Gerald woke to news. The donor heart had gone to someone else. Again, Micah's window was closing. And then, something happened that no one expected. Gerald collapsed in the hallway. Sharp chest pain. Loss of consciousness. His head hit the tile floor with a crack. When he woke up, he was in ICU. The doctor said it was stress-induced cardiac arrhythmia. He blacked out from lack of oxygen. But while they scanned him, they found something else. An anomaly in TDVint. His coronary function. His body was failing him too. Dr. Laren looked torn. "You have options. Medication, intervention. But none of them are perfect." "What about the partial donation you mentioned before?" he asked. She hesitated. "We've reviewed it again. Your condition makes you an even more viable candidate now, if the procedure happens immediately following brain death. But it would have to be sudden, controlled." "You mean planned?" "We can't legally do that." Gerald looked at her. "But if it happened in an accident She didn't respond, just stared at her folded hands. Gerald started writing again. Letters. Dozens of them. One for Micah, one for Claudia, one for Alejandro, one for every nurse on the night shift, one for Dr. Laren. He wrote his will, updated his insurance, cleared his bank accounts. Everything was moving toward a single point of no return. One evening, Micah asked, "Why do you look like you're saying goodbye?" Gerald forced a smile. "Because I'm saying I love you, in case I forget tomorrow." Micah tilted his head. "You're weird." "I know," Gerald said. "But I'm your weird old man now." Micah didn't answer. He just reached out and for the first time held his father's hand. But fate, as always, had its own timing. 3 days later, Micah coded. The hospital announced code blue. A frantic team swarmed room 414. Gerald stood outside, praying. Frozen, helpless. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Then, a pulse. Micah was revived. Barely. But the cardiac surgeon stepped out, his face pale. "That was the last one," he said. "He's not going to survive another." That night, Gerald stood outside the hospital and looked up at the stars. He took a long breath and made a decision. He walked back inside, pulled Dr. Larin aside, and handed her the letter he had written days ago. "If anything happens to me, I want my heart to go to Micah. This is my will. My signature is on file. My blood type is compatible. My heart is sound. I don't care what red tape you have. To cut. This is happening." She stared at him. "Gerald, I'd rather die giving him a chance than live watching him die." At midnight, he stood in room 414. Micah was asleep, face pale. Machines whirring gently. Gerald placed a note on the side table. "One last message. You were never unwanted. I was just too weak to say yes. I say yes now. I always would." He kissed Micah's forehead. And left. Where he went that night, no one knew. But at 3:12 a.m., an ambulance was called. Single car accident. One fatality on scene. Time of death, 3:38. A.M. Name, Gerald Crane. Organ donor, yes. Cardiac viability confirmed. Next. Of kin, Micah Crane. The heart that remembered. The moment Micah woke up, he knew something had changed. Not because of the machines. Not the IVs or the smell of antiseptic or the soft beep of monitors, but something deeper. Something in his chest. He reached for the nurse button, but couldn't lift his arm. His chest felt. Full. Heavy. Alive. Lejandr entered the room with a careful smile. "Hey," she whispered, eyes glossy with tears. "Welcome back," Micah blinked. "Did I?" "You made it." His gaze darted to the wires, the bandages across his torso. "The transplant?" She nodded. He tried to speak. "Whose?" Alejandra hesitated, swallowed, took his hand. "It's better if Dr. Larin explains." When the doctor entered, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Micah watched her carefully. "It was him, wasn't it?" She paused. "Yes." He closed his eyes. A week passed before he could sit up. 2, before he could breathe without pain. 3, before he asked for the letter. The one Gerald had left. It was short, folded in thirds. Smelled faintly like coffee and cologne. "Micah, this isn't a goodbye letter. It's a beginning one. I gave you my heart. Not to say I'm sorry, but to say you matter. This was never about redemption. It was about love. You were always worth showing up for. I just didn't know how. But now, every beat you feel is me finally learning to stay." Dad Micah wept for the first time since he was a boy. He didn't cry for the loss. He cried because, somehow, he didn't feel alone anymore. Claudia came from Cincinnati the next day. She brought photos of Gerald as a teenager, a letter from his childhood, and a small box Micah didn't recognize. Inside was a guitar pick. Old, worn, painted with the words, "Teach me, Blackbird." Micah held it for a long time, then whispered, "He practiced." Claudia nodded. Every day. As Micah recovered, strange things began to happen. He started dreaming of things he didn't remember living. Standing in the snow with numb fingers, the smell of pine and paint thinner. A song half sung on a Milwaukee street corner. Memories that didn't belong to him, but somehow lived in his chest. He told Alejandra once as a joke, "I think his heart remembers things." She didn't laugh. She just placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it does," she said softly. 4 months later, Micah was discharged. He didn't have much. A suitcase, the guitar Claudia had brought, the letters, and a heart that had belonged to a man who once walked away but returned with everything he had. He didn't go back to his old apartment. He went to Milwaukee. To the paint store. The one Gerald had lived above. The apartment was empty. The lease had expired. The landlord, an elderly man with arthritic hands, recognized Micah immediately. "You're the boy," he said. "He used to talk about you. Said he had a son who played guitar better than Clapton." Micah smiled through a lump in his throat. "Did he ever leave anything behind?" The landlord pointed to a box in the back room. Inside were pages of handwritten sheet music, chord progressions. A notebook titled Lessons for Micah. He sat there for hours, reading, playing, crying, until the sun slipped low into the trees outside. That night, Micah walked the city. He stood at the intersection where the accident had happened. They said Gerald had swerved to avoid hitting a deer. Lost control. Crashed into a guardrail. The part of Micah wondered, did he see it coming? Did he make the choice? At the hospital, nurses told him something odd. When he arrived, he was smiling. Micah joined a local foundation a month later, one dedicated to organ donor advocacy. He became a speaker, a voice, a heartbeat that once came from a man he barely knew but now carried inside him. He called the program Secondhand Heart. At his first talk, he opened with a line that silenced the auditorium. "I used to think my father was a stranger. Then I met him. Then I lost him. And now every beat I feel is him telling me he stayed." He spoke of loss, of late redemption, of the strange, miraculous way love can live on in muscle and memory. When the talk ended, a boy approached him. Barely 16. "My dad's in prison," he said. "I used to hate him," Micah smiled. "Then you understand. We don't get to choose how they show up, only how we carry them after." That night, he played Blackbird in his hotel room. The chords were rough, but he played every note, like a prayer, like a promise, like a man who'd finally understood that some fathers leave legacies not in birthdays or baseball games, but in the blood that flows forward. Echoes in the silence. The heart doesn't speak in words. It speaks in rhythms. It speaks in silence between footsteps, in the tremble behind a sigh, in the way someone stares out a window long after the world has moved on. Micah had learned this truth not from books, but from waking up with another man's heartbeat echoing inside his chest. A man who had once denied him and then gave everything. It had been 6 months since the transplant. Spring had come late to Milwaukee, but the city was waking up. Trees were budding. Storefronts were reopening. Life, stubborn, resilient, was booming again. Micah lived in Gerald's old apartment now. He kept it mostly the same. The cracked floorboards, the unpainted wall Gerald had never finished, even the half-broken kitchen chair. Somehow, all of it felt like a shrine, not to death, but to presence. Every day, he sat by the window with Gerald's guitar, played the songs in the notebook, rewrote some, finished others. And every day, he felt less like an orphan. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Just his name in thick black ink. Inside, a single sentence. "I heard what he did. You should know there's more to the story." Micah froze. There was no signature, no clue. He read the letter again. And again. The paper trembled in his fingers. That night, he called Claudia. "Did Dad have any enemies?" She snorted. "Besides himself?" "No, I mean, someone who hated him. Someone who might know something." Claudia paused. "There was one man. He used to come by the hospital after you were born. Said he was Gerald's cousin, but we never found any proof. Rough man. Tattoos. Always asking about money Gerald owed him. Then one day, he disappeared." Micah leaned back in the chair, the creak beneath him sounding like thunder in the stillness. "Do you remember his name?" "No," Claudia said. "But I remember his eyes. cold, and he called Gerald Crane, never Gerald, like he was talking to someone he'd already sentenced. Over the next few days, Micah tried to forget the letter, but it gnawed at him. He had just started to forgive, to rebuild, and now a shadow had crept in through the cracks. Then another envelope arrived, this time with a photo. It was Gerald, much younger, standing beside a rusted pickup truck, his arm around, man with hollow eyes and a face like it had been carved from regret. On the back, Denver, 1997. Micah stared at the photo for hours, thought something about the man next to his father made his stomach twist. That night, he pulled out one of Gerald's old journals, flipped through the pages. Buried between a receipt and a folded napkin was a handwritten note. I told him I couldn't pay, that the past was dead. He said nothing stays buried forever. Micah's throat tightened. Was this man part of the reason Gerald had stayed away? Was he running from something more than fatherhood? Still recovering, Micah wasn't strong enough to chase shadows. So he did the next best thing. He wrote about it. He added a new section to his next talk. Forgiveness is messy. It's not a one-time thing. It's a choice we remake every time the silence starts whispering again. And after that talk, another letter came, this time from someone unexpected. It was from a woman named Ruth, a retired nurse. I worked at the VA hospital in Denver. Your father came in once with a broken rib and a stitched-up arm. Said it was from a car crash, but his eyes told a different story. He left without saying goodbye. But before he did, he gave me a letter. Said to mail it if I ever hurt his son. Survived. I guess that time is now. Inside the envelope was Gerald's letter. Micah, I lied a lot. To your mother, to myself, to the world. But what I never lied about was this. I was scared of what I saw in myself. Scared I'd pass on the worst parts of me. Violence runs in my bloodline. Regret, too. I thought by staying away, I was protecting you. But all I did was steal from us both. There was a man once, someone I owed. I thought he'd hurt you to punish me. That fear drove me away. But in the end, I realized the only thing that really punishes a man is silence. You deserved better. I can't give you my time. But you have my rhythm now. Every beat of your heart. That's me trying to stay. Gerald. Micah folded the letter. With shaking hands. For the first time, the story was complete. Not clean. Not neat. But real. Raw. Human. And that made it enough. In the weeks that followed, Micah started a new project. He recorded the songs he and Gerald had written. An album titled Inherited Silence. It was soft, stripped down, just guitar and voice. But every note rang with grief and grace and growth. He uploaded it online. Didn't expect anything, but it went viral. Thousands of people commented. This helped me forgive my dad. Cried the whole way through. It feels like I'm hearing my own heart talk back. Micah read every message, and then, one night, he posted one of his own. My father didn't raise me, but he gave me something I can't explain. Maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you were denied too. Just know this. The echo doesn't end when they leave. Sometimes it's just beginning. That post was shared over 1 million times. And still, in the quiet of his apartment, when the world finally slept, Micah would sit with Gerald's guitar and just listen. To the creak of the floor. The beat in his chest. The silence between songs. The heartbeat of a man who finally, impossibly, had found a way home. The man in the mirror. The mirror had always been an enemy. Micah used to avoid it when he brushed his teeth. He'd glance past it like it didn't matter, like it didn't hold answers he was afraid to ask. But now, months after the transplant, he found himself drawn to his own reflection. Not out of vanity. Out of curiosity. His face hadn't changed. but something behind his eyes had. There was a weight in his chest that wasn't grief. It was memory. Muscle memory, maybe. Cellular memory, as some articles suggested. A kind of, biological whisper passed down not through words, but through blood and beat. One morning, Micah stared at himself in the mirror longer than usual. And then he said aloud, "Hi, Dad," just to see how it felt. That day, something unexpected happened. A man showed up at the paint store. Micah had kept it open, part-time, not for the money, but for the rhythm. The routine Gerald had lived by. It helped ground him. The man was tall, lean, sunburned, tattoos crawling up his neck. "I'm looking for Crane," he said. Micah's heart thudded. "He's gone." The man's eyes narrowed. "I know. I read the article. The one about the heart." Silence stretched. "I knew your father," he said. "Long time ago. Owed me money." Micah straightened. "And now?" The man shrugged. "Now I owe him something." They sat outside on the loading dock. The man introduced himself as Elias. Lang. Said he'd served with Gerald's cousin in Iraq. Said things got messy after that. Gerald had tried to help him get clean once. Didn't work. "He was better than me," Eli muttered. Never said it, but he was. Micah didn't know what to say. Then Eli reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "This was meant for him," he said. "I wrote it years ago, but I never mailed it. Figured ... Maybe you should read it." Micah opened it slowly. "Crane, I know I wasn't a good friend. You tried to pull me out of a dark place, and I dragged you down instead. But you never stopped trying, even when I deserved it least. You said once that being a man isn't about what you build. It's about what you're willing to lose for someone else to stand. I didn't understand that back then. I do now. Wherever you are. Thank you." Eli Micah folded the letter carefully. "Did he ever tell you about me?" he asked. "Once," Eli said. "He called you a song he hadn't finished." Micah felt something twist in his chest. "That sounds like him." "Yeah," Eli muttered. "It does." They sat in silence. Then Eli stood. "I'm clean now. Been clean 6 years. Got a daughter. She plays drums." Micah smiled. "Send her my album." Eli laughed. "Already did." That night, Micah stood before the mirror again. He touched his chest, over the scar, and whispered, "We're not unfinished anymore." In the following weeks, Micah's health improved dramatically. He started biking again, playing shows, volunteering at the transplant ward. He'd sit with strangers, people like he used to be, and just talk. Sometimes he shared his story. Sometimes he didn't have to. The scar spoke for itself. He became a kind of myth at St. Mary's, the boy with his father's heart. One day, a nurse handed him a crumpled drawing. A child had left it behind, thought it was a stick figure holding a heart. Micah froze. It was almost identical to the one he'd drawn on that first letter he'd sent Gerald. The letter he thought had been lost in a pile of unopened bills. He turned the paper over. There were no words, just a tiny, crooked pencil mark in the bottom right corner, a circle around the heart. That night, Micah sat in Gerald's old armchair and wept. Not for loss, for connection, for mystery, for the idea that maybe, just maybe, love traveled in ways science couldn't trace. He began journaling again. A new entry. Read. I used to think the only thing my father left me was absence. But absence, I've learned, can be a shape. And inside that shape, love can grow, if you let it. Then came a call from a school in Chicago. They'd seen his TEDx talk. They wanted him to speak. Not just about organ donation. But about forgiveness. Micah paused. That word still made him flinch sometimes. But he said yes. In Chicago, he stood on a dimly lit stage in front of 200 teens. He opened with a simple line. Raise Your hand, if you've ever been hurt by someone you thought would never hurt you. All hands went up. Double quotes. Now raise your hand if you've hurt someone and wish you could take it back. Fewer hands. The space between those two is called forgiveness. And sometimes starts with listening to a heartbeat that isn't yours. And deciding to keep it going anyway. A boy came up to him after. Shy. Big eyes. Torn hoodie. My mom left when I was 8, he said. Micah nodded. You still waiting for her to come back? No, the boy said. I'm trying to figure out how to stop being mad. Micah crouched, looked him in the eye. You don't have to stop being mad, he said. Just don't let it turn into silence. Back in Milwaukee, Micah kept performing, but he also kept something else alive. Gerald's story. Not as a eulogy, but as a song that never truly ended. A beat passed down, a father's rhythm, a son's voice. Heartbeat in the hallways. Some people carry their grief like a shadow, always behind them, always silent. Micah carried his like a melody, a slow, soft rhythm that underlined every step he took, every conversation, every breath. It didn't weigh him down. It moved with him. It became him, and it guided him back to a place he never thought he'd return to. St. Mary's Children's Center. He came not as a patient this time, but as a volunteer. Not with a chart, but with a guitar. The first day back was surreal. The hallways looked smaller. The walls still wore the same faded animal murals. Some of the nurses still recognized him. Some didn't. The janitor gave him a curious glance as if trying to place a familiar face. He walked past room 414 slowly. Empty now. A different child lived there. A different story was being written behind that door. Micah paused for a moment, then moved on. He played his first session in the rec room. 3 kids. 2 IV poles. One child asleep with headphones on. Micah strummed gently. Didn't sing. Just let the chords drift into the corners of the room like sunlight through old blinds. And slowly, little eyes opened. A girl with no hair tapped her toe. A boy with bandages around his chest sat up. By the end of the hour, they were clapping. Not loudly, but enough to know that something had reached them. One nurse, a quiet woman named Shayla, approached him afterward. I remember. You, she said. You were the miracle. He shook his head gently. No, Gerald was. She looked down at the guitar. Still playing the same one? He smiled. Same strings too. Never broke. She raised an eyebrow. That's impossible. He looked down at the fretboard. Maybe some hearts just old. Over the next few weeks, Micah became a fixture at St. Mary's. He played twice a week, met with patients, talked to parents. Sometimes he just sat in the hallway reading. But the real reason he kept coming? It was the silence. The sacred hush that existed in hospital hallways after visiting hours. The kind of silence that matched the one Gerald had left him. And somehow, healed it. One evening, Shayla sat beside him in the lobby after a long shift. Why you really come back? She asked. Micah thought for a long moment. Because this place, it gave me my father. Not biologically, not even surgically, emotionally, spiritually. If I leave, I'm afraid I'll forget the sound of that gift. Shayla nodded slowly. I think he'd be proud of you. Micah looked out the window. I hope so. Then came a surprise. The hospital offered him a part-time job. Music therapy assistant. No medical license required. Just a heart that understood. Micah took it. Not because he needed the money, because he needed the purpose. On his first official day, he was given a badge. Had his name, a photo, and under his title, Micah Crane, Therapeutic Arts. The name felt strange. For most of his life, he'd avoided it. Crane. But now, it felt earned. Later that day, as he left, He saw a father standing in the hallway outside room 312, pale, shaking, holding a stuffed rabbit in one hand and an unread letter in the other. Micah knew that look. He walked up slowly. Waiting to go in? He asked. The man blinked. Yeah, but I don't know if he wants me to. Micah nodded. I didn't think mine wanted me either. The man looked at him. What changed? I showed up anyway. That night, Micah wrote a new song. It was about doors. Doors left unopened. Doors walked through. Doors held shut by guilt and finally opened by forgiveness. He called it Hallway Light. A few weeks later, a journalist reached out. She wanted to do a follow-up story. The first article, Man Donates Heart to Son He Denied, had gone viral months ago. But this new piece would focus not on the transplant, but on the after, on the ripples, on what happens when a miracle becomes a lifestyle. During the interview, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Micah smiled. Every day. She tilted her head. Does that scare you? No, he said, because it reminds me I wasn't just given a second chance. I was given someone's first. When the article went live, it was titled, A Heartbeat in the Hallways. The son who lives where his father died. The world responded again. But this time, it wasn't shock. It was resonance. One message stood out. My dad left when I was 4. This story helped me stop asking, why? And start asking, what now? Micah saved that one, printed it, taped it to his wall, right next to Gerald's photo. Every day, Micah lived with a rhythm that wasn't entirely his own, but it didn't feel borrowed. It felt entrusted. And in the quiet moments, in the hallways, the elevators, the stairwells, sometimes he'd press his hand to his chest and feel it. That steady, stubborn beat. Like a promise kept, like a man who stayed. The sound a scar makes. Scars don't speak in pain. They speak in echo. They speak when a shirt brushes over them just wrong, or when silence falls between laughter, or when someone says something ordinary and you suddenly remember something. Irreversible. Micah had one long scar across his chest, curved slightly, jagged at the edges. He called it his second signature, his real name written in flesh. He had stopped hiding it. Spring gave way to summer. The halls at St. Mary's remained cool and humming, but the city beyond bloomed with green. Micah biked to work now. Same route every day. Past the park where Gerald used to sit on lunch breaks. Past the paint store. Past the church where he'd left at first broken prayer. Everything was part of a map now, a journey that looped. Not in circles, but in a spiral that somehow moved forward by folding back in on itself. One morning, while prepping a guitar session for a teenage leukemia patient, Micah noticed a boy staring at his scar. The boy was maybe 13, quiet, angry, probably. The kind of anger you wear like a coat because taking it off would leave you too exposed. Does it hurt? The boy asked. Micah shook his head. Not anymore. Get it? Yes, he said truthfully. But not the way you think. The boy kept staring. Finally said, I think my dad wishes I died instead of my brother. Micah's breath caught. He didn't say, no, he doesn't. He didn't lie. He just said, that's a heavy thing to carry, especially on a heart that's still learning how to beat. The boy looked down. Micah sat beside him, told him how he once believed he was born into someone's regret and how that belief almost killed them both. Later, alone in the chapel, Micah journaled. Some people believe hearts are fragile, but I think they're the strongest thing we have, not because they endure, but because they remember. Mine remembers a man who walked away and came back in the one way that mattered. And when it beats, it tells me. Scars don't close a story. They open it. That night, he had a dream. He was walking through the woods, somewhere foggy and ancient. Trees stretched like cathedrals overhead. He heard a guitar playing in the distance. A song he hadn't written, but somehow recognized. He followed the sound to a clearing, and there was Gerald, sitting on a log, strumming, head down. The same way he used to play when nervous. Micah stood frozen. Then Gerald looked up, smiled, didn, single quotes to say a word. Just patted the log beside him. Micah sat together. They played no words, no forgiveness spoken aloud. Only music, and breath. And two hearts. One lost, one found, in rhythm. When Micah woke, his chest ached, not with pain, with memory. A few days later, he was invited to perform at a national transplant conference. He was nervous. Not about the music, but the message. What do you say to a room full of people who already know loss? He stood on stage, no slides, no introduction. Just his scar, his story, his father's rhythm and his voice. I used to think I was unwanted. I used to think love had to come early to matter. I was wrong. He told him about Gerald, about the letter, about the final ride, the crash, the decision. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't cry. He just told the truth. And then he played a song titled Scars That Sing. The room was silent when it ended. Then, applause. Real, raw, sustained. Backstage, a woman approached him, late 40s, graying hair, nervous fingers. She said, "My daughter just got a heart. She's 10. I didn't want her to know where it came from, but now I think I will." Micah nodded. "Let her choose how to carry it. She surprise you." That night, he walked the city. Stopped at the crash site again. Someone had spray painted a small heart on the guardrail. Red, faded, but still visible. He ran his fingers over the steel. Whispered, "I didn't waste it, Dad. I swear to you, I didn't." Back home, he played a voice memo Gerald had once left him. Just a few seconds long. Clipped, nervous. "This is probably dumb, but if you ever learn to play this, I'll be listening. Always." Micah played the song that followed. A simple melody. Rough around the edges, but full of effort. Full of love. He whispered, "You're not dumb. You're my heartbeat now." And the guitar answered. The living will. Most people write wills about what to do when they're gone. Micah decided to write one about what to do while he was still here. He called it his living will, but it wasn't a legal document. It was a personal one, a manifesto, a guide, a vow. He wrote it on the back of one of Gerald's old receipts, the kind with paint smudges and half-torn corners, because that felt more honest than polished stationery. "This is what I owe the world. Forgetting to keep the heartbeat, I almost lost. Show up when it's uncomfortable. Speak even when the silence is easier. Forgive faster than I used to. Love harder than I thought I could. Carry my father forward. Not as guilt, but as a gift. Let people change. Especially myself." He folded it, put it in the guitar case, and carried it with him. That same week, Micah received an unexpected call. Valerie's mother, his grandmother, was in the hospice care. They'd never met. Not once. She had disowned Gerald and never reached out to Micah, fearing the mess of old family scars. But now, in her final days, she'd asked for him. "I want to say one thing," she told the nurse. "I want to meet the boy with Gerald's heart." Micah hesitated, but something inside, something old and unfinished, said, "Go." The hospice center smelled of lavender and bleach. The walls were quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after. A storm has passed but left behind wreckage. She was small, fragile, skin like paper. But her eyes were sharp. "You have his jaw," she rasped, "and your mother's stubbornness." Micah sat down. "She talked about me? She wrote you letters she never sent." The nurse handed him a box. Dozens of unopened envelopes. dated from every year of his life. Micah ran his fingers across them, then looked at the woman before him. "I hated Gerald for leaving her," she said, "but I hate myself more for doing the same to you." Micah didn't speak. He simply took her hand. "Do you hate me?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I've run out of hate." She wept. He held her hand until the morphine lulled her back into sleep. That night, Micah read the letters. They were imperfect, rambling, filled with love, regret, advice, and longing. She wrote about birthdays she missed, milestones she imagined, songs she thought he'd like. The last letter ended with, "I hope you get the heart you need, and that it comes from someone who finally understood you." Micah smiled through the tears. It did. He thought. It did. A month later, Micah's nonprofit, Secondhand Heart, reached a milestone. They had placed emotional support volunteers in every major pediatric transplant center across the state. Micah was asked to speak at the launch gala. He stepped onto the stage in a simple black shirt. No flash, just presence. "I was given life by someone who thought he'd taken it from me. I was given breath by someone who once stole it. And I learned that it's never too late to become the person someone else believes you still can be. My father didn't raise me, but he raised a standard, one I try to live by every single day." Then he read his living will aloud, and afterward played the last song Gerald had written in his notebook, "Start Again Anyway." After the performance, a woman approached him, holding a small child with a scar like his own. "She listens to your music every night," the mother said. "She knows your story. She calls your songs heartbeats." Micah bent down, smiled at the girl. "Want to know a secret?" She nodded. "My heart learned your name today." She beamed. That night, Micah returned home and found a new envelope in his mailbox. No stamp, no address. Just his name. Inside was a single photo, a grainy print of him and Gerald, sitting side by side on a park bench. But it had never been taken. Not really. He stared at it. And realized it was the dream, the one he'd had months ago. Gerald. On the lawn, the guitar. It had manifested. Someone, somehow, had captured it. On the back, "I'm still here, Dad." Micah closed his eyes. He didn't try to explain it, didn't try to rationalize it. He just listened. To the rhythm in his chest. To the song that never stopped playing. One last song. The last song didn't come in a rush. It came in pieces. Fragments of melody humming through late nights. Whispered lyrics scratched onto napkins. Notes hummed while watching the rain. Micah knew this one had to be different. It wasn't a tribute. It wasn't a confession. It was a thank you. He called it One Last Song. But he knew it wasn't the last at all. Just the last one that Gerald hadn't helped write. 1 year had passed since the transplant. Micah stood alone on a small outdoor stage in a Milwaukee park, the same one Gerald used to sit in during his lunch breaks. There was no audience at first. Just wind, grass, a few birds, and that was enough. He placed a photo of Gerald on the empty stool beside him, tuned the guitar, and played. The song was simple. It had no chorus. Just verses. Each one a moment. The letter unopened on a cluttered desk. A handshake in a hospital room. A whispered promise. A fatal crash. A beating heart passed forward. Each line carried Gerald's memory. His mistakes, his courage, his return. People gathered as the melody carried across the park. An old man on a bench. A coatorn. People gathered as the melody carried across the park. An old man on a bench. A pajiridi. People gathered as the mild man on a bench. A boj. Mother with a child in a stroller. 2 nurses walking home from the hospital. They didn't know the story, but they felt it. Because music doesn't need backstory. It just needs truth. After the final note, Micah sat in silence. Then whispered, "Thanks for waiting, Dad." That evening, He returned home and opened the last of Valerie's letters. Dated the year he turned 18. You're probably angry. Maybe lost. Maybe wondering who you really are. Let me say this clearly. You are not your father's absence. You are his potential. You are what he didn't get to be. And maybe one day, he'll come back and see what he missed. And maybe he'll say, that was mine. And I hope you'll tell him, no, I was never yours. But now I choose to be. Micah held the paper to his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt whole, not healed. That's not how grief works, but complete. He created a foundation grant the next week. The Gerald Crane Legacy Fund. 2. Support late reunion organ families and pay travel expenses for estranged parents seeking reconciliation before or after transplants. Its slogan? It's never too late to return. The first recipient was a man named Thomas, estranged from his son since prison. His son now needed a kidney. He hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. Micah sat with Thomas before he boarded the bus. Thomas trembled. What if he doesn't want to see me? Micah handed him a guitar pick, the one Gerald had painted. Teach me Blackbird. Thomas stared at it. Micah smiled. Start there. Later that year, Micah released his full-length album, titled simply Crane. The final track. One last song, a stripped-down version, just acoustic and breath. It went viral again. Not because of promotion, because people heard themselves in it. People commented, this made me call my dad. I forgave someone today. I was going to give up. But this reminded me, maybe I'm someone's second chance. On the anniversary of Gerald's death, Micah returned to the same chapel in St. Mary's where his father once made a silent deal with God. He sat in the same pew, wrote one final letter. Gerald, you gave me your heart, but more than that, you gave me the proof that people can return. Not everyone gets a second chance, but because of you, I did. So here's my promise. I will keep playing. I will keep telling the story. I will keep showing up for those who think it's too late, because it's not. It never was. I love you, Dad. Micah, he placed it at the altar. Stood. Pressed his hand to his chest. And walked out into a world still full of scars, still full of pain. But now. Also full of echoes. And songs. And heartbeat after heartbeat after heartbeat.